Many games in the Final Fantasy franchise have used treasure chests as a way of rewarding players for exploring their vast worlds. Much of the excitement around the hunt therefore came from the anticipation about what could actually be in the chest, as players never really knew if they were going to receive an ultimate weapon or yet another potion. But not all chests were designed to feel like rewards. Some chests were there to subvert player expectations, punishing them for opening the chest by introducing a powerful monster instead of simply giving them a reward off the bat, while other chests were cruel in how they manipulated players by taking rewards away. Encounters of this sort were designed to be very rare, meaning that most players weren't adequately prepared for what they were about to experience. And in a franchise where preparation and strategy are very important, being caught off guard by an unexpected monster in a box could easily lead to a party wipe and a game over. That's why we wanted to go over 7 chests you absolutely regretted opening if you weren't prepared. Now, as usual, we're going to be only covering 1 entry per game, and to kick things off, we're going to start with a monster in a box from Final Fantasy VI that was designed to party wipe unprepared players almost instantly. Final Fantasy VI is without doubt a game that is adored amongst the fanbase, with players appreciating the expansive optional content that was added over time. In this regard, one of the most well-known pieces of optional content is a bonus dungeon called the Dragon's Den, as this was where players could face reincarnated and powered-up versions of all 8 legendary dragons. But as harrowing as the legendary dragons made the dungeon on their own, other features then added to the challenge. And one such feature was the presence of 3 chests that hid a secret boss encounter inside. All 3 battles were particularly difficult, but the encounter with Plague has been responsible for many party wipes against unprepared players. As soon as the battle began, Plague casted Doom on all party members, meaning that time was therefore instantly limited for the player to win before experiencing a game over. What's more, Plague was designed to prevent players from acting fast enough to eliminate it before the Doom counter reached 0. It did this by using Confuse on player characters so they wouldn't be able to act efficiently in combat, and it would even speed up the Doom counter by casting Haste on the party. Anyone who was unprepared therefore didn't stand much of a chance. But those who succeeded, however, were able to acquire the Angel Brush, which was a uniquely powerful brush boasting 170 attack power with a 1 in 4 chance of casting Confuse with each successful attack. As Final Fantasy II was one of the first games in the franchise, the developers at Square were still experimenting with ideas, and those ideas related to all aspects of design. But one of the areas where there was perhaps the most room for experimentation was with the monsters. And it was in Final Fantasy II that the coeurl first appeared. This version of the coeurl was particularly dangerous for players to encounter because of its ability called Blaster X, which inflicted paralysis on the party and prevented them from taking any actions. But even though this did make the coeurl dangerous, when fought alone or in a small group, most on-level parties were able to deal with the coeurl encounter without staring at a game over screen. That wasn't the case, however, for unfortunate players who found themselves opening a certain trick chest on the 6th floor of Castle Palamecia. Doing so sent players into an encounter with a group of coeurls accompanied by Lamia Queen, which was a boss earlier in the game. Similar to coeurls, the Lamia Queen could also afflict status effects upon the party that, in effect, removed them from combat, like sleep. This configuration of enemies tore through many unprepared parties by simply limiting how often they could actually take actions before hammering them with high amounts of damage with no fear of any kind of retaliation. Now, as we mentioned with Final Fantasy VI, Square has always been a fan of adding new elements into games they remaster or re-release for fans. And when Square released the Game Boy Advance version of Final Fantasy V, this unsurprisingly meant they added a few new things to the game as well, including a new super boss called Neo Shinryu, which served as a powered-up version of one of the original super bosses, Shinryu. Much like its predecessor, which was also a monster in a box which granted players the Ragnarok upon defeat, Neo Shinryu also appeared inside a box, this time guarding Ultima Weapon. Due to its designation, it's probably not too surprising to hear that Neo Shinryu was actually a very difficult encounter, even for high-level parties that were prepared, And this was because of its high stats, large number of powerful abilities, and the ability for it to become temporarily invincible. Many of Neo Shinryu's attacks dealt percentage-based damage, meaning it could cut down the HP of full parties, bringing them to a state where they were susceptible to being knocked out. Neo Shinryu also had multiple reaction attacks, which kept the pressure on players throughout the fight, with abilities like White Hole, which inflicted death and petrify on the attacking party member, or abilities like Doom, which could then instantly kill the character after a set period of time. But even if a party managed to bring the super boss's HP to 0, they could still lose the fight, because Neo Shinryu casted powerful spells as it died, slamming the party with both Giga Flare and Meteor in an attempt to take them down at the same time. Now, there's a notion that ultimate weapons should never be easy to obtain, but in the case of the Zodiac Spear, it was less hard work that was needed and more luck. That or psychic abilities. This was because there were two ways to obtain the Zodiac Spear in the original version of Final Fantasy XII, and both were rather cruel. We're going to focus on the first way, however, as it aligns well with this video. But unlike the previous entries, this wasn't because a cruel monster lay in wait to punish unsuspecting players. In the Necrol of Nabudis, players could find a set of 16 chests laid out in a grid. The Zodiac Spear was located in a chest in the front row, and was easy enough to pick up. No big boss fights, convoluted side quests, or minigames to complete, just opening a chest. If only things were that simple. The problem was that while the Zodiac Spear was indeed inside the chest, a number of small things could cause it not to be, and these small things were unknown to the player. To begin with, there were 4 specific chests located throughout the world that the player was not allowed to open. They could be found in Rabanastre and its royal palace, the Nalbina dungeons, and the Fon Coast. If any of these were opened by the player, the Zodiac Spear would no longer be available in the Necrol. To make matters worse, the Zodiac Spear would also not appear if the player had any diamond armlets equipped, an extremely easy oversight. If the first method was rendered null and void though, the player could attempt to obtain the Zodiac Spear in the Hen Mines Phase 2 dig. But even this method also had some interesting prerequisites that also involved chests, which ended up being rather cruel in itself. Final Fantasy III followed the stories of the Warriors of Light as they went on a quest to restore balance to the world. This quest eventually led them to the World of Darkness, the game's final dungeon, and it was here that players were presented with many powerful enemy encounters and powerful loot. 4 chests in the World of Darkness contained 4 of the 5 ribbons that could be found throughout an entire playthrough of the game, and as they were one of the best pieces of equipment in the game, warding against most status ailments and providing high resistance to most elements, they were very valuable. However, any player who opened one of the 4 chests containing a ribbon would first have to defeat Zande's clone. What made this particularly frustrating for players was that all 4 chests had a Zande clone hiding inside, so players needed to implement a successful strategy to overcome the boss not just once, but 4 times, and this was kind of unprecedented. Given that Zande's clone was able to cast Quake, Flare, Meteor, Thunderguard, Protect, and Haste, it was no pushover, and the damage from those spells was able to quickly add up, risking a party wipe. Although each clone was slightly weaker than the original Zande, being just 1 level lower, it was still an unwelcome surprise each time a player opened a chest, only to find yet another clone. Final Fantasy X was a game centered around the party going on a long pilgrimage across the world of Spira. This kept players on a mostly linear path for a majority of the game, and this persisted until they gained access to the airship in the late game. Once players could then use the airship, they were able to find various secret locations on the world map by choosing to travel to specific hidden coordinates, and one of those secret locations was the Omega Ruins. Many of the fiends encountered in this dungeon, like the Great Marlborough, were capable of wearing down even well-prepared parties who'd filled out large chunks of their sphere grids. This meant that any time navigating the dungeon was quite risky. Throughout the dungeon though, the development team hid 4 groups of chests that either contained a mimic or one of 12 treasures. Although the mimics themselves weren't particularly dangerous compared to other fiends in the dungeon, opening a chest with a mimic inside caused all the other chests in the group to disappear. This was an issue because players who were able to open 12 chests from those 4 groups of chests were gifted 99 warp spheres, which were some of the most powerful spheres in the game. Players who fell just short of getting 12 chests in one run due to running into one too many mimics, therefore felt a mix of frustration and regret having opened the wrong chests. And what made this especially frustrating for players was that the chest game could only be attempted once in a single save file. So opening the wrong chests led to players losing out on the chance to earn 99 warp spheres. That then brings us onto our final entry, which relates to Dissidia Duodecim. Unlike most other Final Fantasy games, those found in the Dissidia line were fighting games, and therefore had a rather different setup from the typical role-playing genre. But that didn't stop the developers from including some classic elements along the way. In Duodecim's third story mode, Chaos transformed into an unhinged being called Feral Chaos, who then became the antagonist in its 5-act story. When players accessed the Southern Lufanian Gateway in the early stages of the story, they happened upon a red chest. Players who opened that chest were then forced into a battle against a level 95 Feral Chaos, which was a rather unwelcome surprise. Thankfully, Feral Chaos was designed to be taken down like a raid boss, given the fight against him was a party battle. This meant players had the ability to use multiple characters to try and take him down together, but that didn't make it any less uncomfortable, as Feral Chaos had access to a large number of powerful attacks that allowed him to quickly reach maximum bravery, while also having a massive HP pool. But with that, they were 7 chests that you absolutely regretted opening, if you weren't prepared. How many of these chests ended up lulling you into a false sense of security, before then leading you either into an unexpected game over, or forcing you to miss out on some coveted items or equipment? Be sure to let us know in the comments below, as well as any other chests you feel deserved a place on this list. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. Alright everyone, with that, this is Daryl signing out. As always, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, CloudClone28, The Livestream, Gregory, and Zukin TDK, who are super special Onion Knight supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.